Welcome back. It's more Sports Corner on WQUD 107.7 Vintage Radio, Erie, Illinois. We're taping a show today, and man, I am pleased to mention or announce our today's guest is Pat Miletich, the one and only Pat Miletich. Pat, how are we doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. We've been trying to get this schedule, but you're a busy man, especially on the weekends. And before we started taping shows, it was almost impossible.
Madness for me, but we're making it happen.
That's right. Most people know, I mean, you're kind of a household name in the Quad Cities, but also nationwide and even worldwide as far as the UFC circle goes. When did you first get into UFC?
You know, I'm trying to think of the name or the date that I actually fought in the 4-man tournament. It was in UFC, 11 or something like that. UFC 16 in Battle. It was called Battle on the Bayou down in New Orleans at the Pontchartrain Center.
Okay,
right on Pontchartrain Lake there, and I won the 4-man tournament. So that was 98, 99, something like that. And I had been fighting obviously Muay Thai kickboxing, some boxing, and also some mixed martial arts. I won a couple mixed martial arts tournaments. And I think I had about 20 or 22 fights when I finally went in the UFC, something like that. So I'd had enough experience at least.
And back then it was a lot different than what it is now. I mean, it's kind of like boxing, and in and of its, you've got your challengers and your champions and everything. But back then, kind of explain when you talk about a 4-man tournament, it was just 4 guys were invited and you fought twice in a day, right?
Yeah, well, the Battle of the Masters tournaments in Chicago were the ones that I first got into. A friend of mine from Chicago who owned a martial arts gym who refereed my Muay Thai fights up in Chicago called me up one day and goes, hey, there's an 8-man, no rules, no weight division, no time limit tournament. You know, the only rules back then for those tournaments was no eye gouging and no biting. So everything else was you were good to go. You headbutt, pointed elbows, downward elbows, you name it, and groin strikes even. So I got into that tournament, and that was, I forget the year. I apologize because I fought for so many years. It's like a different life to me now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But so anyway, got into that tournament. There was everybody in it was easily 220 or bigger. So I was a little nervous going in, but I ended up winning it. Didn't take me long in each fight to win, and then I went back to the second Battle of the Masters. And that was, they had brought in a Russian who was a K1 world champion who was 6'5", about 245, named Andrei Dudko. He looked exactly like Ivan Drago from Rocky.
Yeah.
I mean, he was that scary looking. And Mark Hansen, who's a Davenport police officer, was with me. We were training partners. Cornered, and Andrei Dudko walked into the locker room, and Hansen looked at me, and you know how big Hansen is.
Oh, yeah.
Hansen looks at me and goes, oh. I said, thanks for your vote of confidence. But so we were on opposite sides of the bracket, and I did beat Andre. I think I finished him with a choke in about 2 minutes, but luckily I could out-wrestle somebody that big. So I had to win a lot of fights, I guess is my point, to finally get into the UFC. So I think, that was important for me to end up being able to win a title in the UFC just because I had enough preparation, I think.
Well, and yeah, because you actually kind of not really started in the UFC or started in Ultimate Fighting, but started your life, that kind of stuff in wrestling, right? Yeah,
I started wrestling. I think I was 5 or 6 years old when I first started wrestling. I was horrible. I got pinned every match for like 3 years.
That's what makes you better, though.
At least I stuck with it. I was so frustrated that I couldn't win a match that I think it made me stick with it. Mm-hmm. And I was one of those kids that always got picked on. I was just skinny and my bones stuck out everywhere. And I didn't want to be that kid. So I thought to myself, if I stick this out long enough, hopefully I'll get good eventually, and people will quit picking on me and taking my bikes from me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, the wrestling was instrumental, and wrestlers, in my mind, ultimately make the best, mixed martial arts, just because you can decide when the fight goes to the ground and when it doesn't. You know what I mean?
Well, another rumor, maybe you can confirm this or not. You were also the nose guard at Bettendorf?
I played nose guard at Bettendorf High School my junior and senior year. I weighed 165, but I was strong and I was fast. I ran like a 4.4, 540. And I think my max bench back then, my senior year, was like 365. So I was small, but I was pretty strong.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where Hansen and I first met. Mark Hansen, my good buddy. He played center at Davenport Central on their state championship team.
Oh, really?
And so every time they came up on the ball to snap the ball, Hansen and I were running our mouths at each other. So...
Now, is he about the same age as Roger Craig, or is he
No.
younger?
Mark Hansen and I are the same age. Roger Craig's quite a bit older than us. I mean, I remember Roger playing tailback at Davenport Central when I was a little kid. As a matter of fact, Roger Craig was a senior at Nebraska playing against Iowa in Kinnick Stadium when I was in, I think, 7th grade.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say he's quite a bit older.
Yeah, yeah.
But I can remember back in the 90s, you two were both fighting together in the same tournament, weren't you?
Yeah, yeah. He would fight in the heavyweight division. I would fight in the lower division, basically. Okay. And so we fought on several cards together, and then he got a lot of pressure. Back then, it was a controversial sport, so he got a lot of pressure from the department.
Right.
And so, he had to talk with me and said, "Look, I'm going to keep training. Obviously, I want to be good at this stuff for my job, but I'm getting so much pressure from the department that I'm going to go ahead and bow out and just help you get ready for fights and stuff like that." So yeah, but Mark was definitely one of the top 10 heavyweights in the world when he was getting after it.
Impressive.
Yeah, tough guy.
Now back then, was there actually a world champion type of thing, or was it just you went in and had the UFCs, the 4-man brackets?
Well, they had 8-man tournaments, they had 4-man tournaments, then we actually would fight for world titles against, like Mikey Burnett. He won his first fight in the 4-man tournament, but bowed out because of exhaustion. And so I didn't get a chance to fight him in the finals. So then they put he and I together in Sao Paulo, Brazil after that for the actual belt. Oh, so okay. That's how that went. Then they used to have the Ultimates with all the big guys. Don Fry and Coleman and
Severin.
All those, Dan Severin, all those monsters would fight. And then they would have, individual titles also. So John Peretti is actually the guy that made up the rules, made the weight divisions, all that sort of stuff. And about at the same time, Monty Cox, my manager, and I, because the state of Iowa did not want the sport at all. And so really? we were holding tournaments at the Mark. That's when Monty Cox was promoting at the Mark. And Monty used to be the biggest boxing promoter in Iowa, and he told the athletic commission, "I'm done promoting with you guys if you guys won't accept this sport." And Larry Dawson was completely against the sport until he finally came around, and we took him to an event. He watched it, and we explained what was going on, and he understood the complexities then. And then he said, "Okay, you guys write the rules, and we'll take a look at them, and then we'll get it passed." So that's kind of how that went down.
Well, yeah, because ironically, a lot of the good fighters at the beginning especially were from Iowa.
Yeah,
weren't there? There
was a ton Midwest guys and stuff. Guys that Matt Hughes, who came up from Southern Illinois, and a lot of the guys from the Midwest, some Hawkeye wrestlers, some other college wrestlers, and it was kind of, to be honest, it was easy for me to do because by then I had a cookie cutter system on how to teach wrestlers how to fight. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? How to stay out of trouble on the ground, how to get out of submissions, the fundamentals of positioning for fighting. The striking portion of things, all that sort of stuff, and how to tie all the transitions between them together. And it was like I just had a factory belt, a conveyor belt of fighters coming out of there back then. I mean, we had, at one time, I think, 50 top-ranked guys in the world in one room. It was a very scary room.
Well, one time, correct me if I'm wrong, but there were 4 weight classes and 3 of the world champions were out of your...
There were, I think, 5 weight classes, and we had 3. We had 4 total, because we had also Dave Monet, Matt Hughes, Tim Sylvia, Jens Pulver, Dave Monet, Rich Franklin, who trained with us an awful lot. Those guys were UFC champs. Mm-hmm. So
now, how did you make the transition from being a wrestler and when you get taken down, you want to go directly to your belly to all of a sudden now it's the opposite?
Right. It took me a long time, to be honest with you. I was very claustrophobic, especially training with guys like Mark Hansen, Dave Turner. Remember him? He played football at Iowa. He was an Iowa State wrestling champion. Dave Turner he had to be 6'5", 6'6", 290, 295, wow. And he was a good athlete. So me wrestling with those guys, I'm not going to overpower either of them. So I'm underneath them constantly, just battling, just trying to breathe, with those guys mauling you. And so it kind of that. I learned to use technique because I knew I couldn't overpower them. And that's kind of, you learn those survival skills with big guys like that. And so that helped a lot. But that got me over that phobia of wanting to turn over. So
Absolutely. But, nowadays, I've seen it's kind of stayed with wrestlers and stuff, but there's a lot of different mixed martial arts that the people are using nowadays. Because at first, like Gracie, they did rather well when they first came into the UFC.
Yeah. And, well, it's... if you look at the grappling arts that are really important, it's a combination of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Catch Can, which was Farmer Burns and all those guys back in the 20s, turn of the century guys who, the Carnival Strongman, my great uncle, who was on the 32 Olympic boxing team, used to go to carnivals and beat up the Carnival Strongman because the Carnival Strongman would do feats of strength and then they'd challenge somebody to get in the ring and fight them a lot of times. Mm-hmm. So my uncle who was a great boxer and wrestler from Albia, Iowa, down in southern Iowa, would get in there and beat these guys up. And that was back when the Paraguayan strongmen, the Terrible Turks, all those types of guys were traveling with the carnivals.
Right.
They were the big club swingers, the mall swingers, all that sort of stuff, the old school stuff. And really, powerful guys. And so my uncle used to go and beat them up. So that's the catch-as-catch-can wrestling is where that came from. Great American grapplers through history. Russian Sambo, which is the art of basically leg breaking. It's a very complex system of leg locks. And if you're good at that, you can get a lot of people in trouble.
Oh, I bet.
It's because people just aren't good at defending their legs. And, judo, of course, and then you go to the striking arts of boxing, Muay Thai kickboxing, some other kickboxing, and traditional martial arts. So it's a blend. I was lucky because I had, the wrestling background in Iowa. I boxed at the Davenport Boxing Club with Alvino Pena when he was coaching down there, and they had Michael Nunn and Antoine Eccles and the McGowan brothers and all those crazy guys back then who were incredible boxers. So I'd go down there and donate blood constantly. That was about a 2-year process to where I got up to speed with those guys. And then my Muay Thai coach who taught me Muay Thai was a guy named Long Longley, who was a stadium champion in Thailand.
Okay.
And so the Muay Thai is, if you put it with boxing, footwork, and head movement, with the hand skills is a really deadly combination standing up. It's really scary stuff because the infighting, the elbows, they'll even use headbutts in traditional Muay Thai, and then the knees, and then they use their shin bones like baseball bats to destroy anything they hit. I mean, if you block one of their head kicks wrong with your arm, it'll shatter your forearm. It'll powder it. So because those guys are kicking. Those are 180-mile-an-hour kicks. So you got to imagine a Louisville Slugger getting swung at your head, and you block it with your forearm wrong, and it's done. It's done.
I can remember as a kid, or actually in high school, the movie Bloodsport came out, and when UFC first came out, I think that's what people kind of saw UFC as, was kind of like the Bloodsport,
the rawness of it, right?
Yeah,
and well, with the the no rules back then, and John McCarthy, who's been a good friend over the years. He's refereed a lot of my fights. He was instructed by the owners of the UFC not to stop the fights.
Oh, wow.
It was, you wait till the guy goes unconscious, basically, and that's what they told him. They wanted that rawness. They wanted guys getting destroyed. So,
well, and it's turned into probably the truest sport. I mean, there's, even back then, there's probably even more of a true sport. But nowadays, there's so many things that if you don't train for it and you don't do it properly, boxing, they've always gotten kind of a bad rap and different things. But
right.
When it comes to true sports and you're out there, it's just one against one, and it's you or win or be killed type of thing. I mean, not literally.
Right?
But,
no, I get it. But the sport, when you go back in time a couple thousand years of the pancration at the original Olympics, that's what they were doing. It was submission grappling and striking and everything all tied together. So the sport's been around forever. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the way I've always described it, as before any of the baseballs and basketballs and footballs and all that sort of stuff were invented, there was just one sport that was man against man, and it really is the purest form of sport, because you just don't have excuses.
Right.
There's no timeouts, besides now, of course, the eye gouging and groin strikes, whatever. But there didn't used to be timeouts for anything. You just kept fighting, did your best.
There's a small group of guys. I used to be a wrestling coach here in town, and it was Erie Provincetown Wrestling, but there's a bunch of guys that went to Provincetown that are living in Linden now that are into grappling. What's the difference between wrestling, grappling, and UFC fighting type of stuff?
Well, the wrestling, whether it's folk style, freestyle, of course, and Greco, you understand Greco's all upper body. Freestyle's more amplitude, high amplitude throws, less time spent riding people, all that sort of stuff. Folk style's where it's, what you see in high school and college in America. And then the submission grappling, whether it's the catch wrestling, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, Sambo, that's where wrestling used to be. Mm-hmm. And then that form, the catch-as-catch-can, went into the pro wrestling.
Okay.
They wanted to make more flair to it and put theatrics in it. But the actual real submission grappling is you're going for submissions to finish the guy, chokeholds, joint locks to dislocate joints, things like that. So.
But there's no striking?
Not in submission grappling, nope. And then in pure MMA, you can take all of that stuff plus the striking and throw it all together into just an all-out fight, I guess you could say.
Now, I mean, you've had, or not had, but you've heard a lot of arguments over the years, which would make a better UFC fighter, was the wrestling background or the Gracie jiu-jitsu background. In your mind?
Well, nowadays, I mean, and I told my Brazilian jiu-jitsu instructor, the first guy that taught me, Sergio Monteiro, when I went down to Florida to train with him, they actually sent me to train with him to see if I was good enough to get into what was called the Reality Super Fights, which was a pay-per-view event. And so I went down there, grappled with him. He said, "We're just going to grapple. I'm going to see where you're at." And we went at it for 45 minutes. He couldn't submit me, but he was a very good black belt. He was doing things that I'd never seen before. I had no clue what he was doing, and just buzzing all over my body and going for submissions. I was just muscling out of stuff because I was stronger than him, to be honest with you. And we got done, and he said, "Where did you learn your jiu-jitsu?" And I said, "Off videotapes." He goes, "What?" And I said, "Yeah, that's all." Mark Hansen and I would take these instructional videos, and we'd do one move per hour every morning for 4 hours. So 4 moves in 4 hours. We would drill it relentlessly, and we went through that whole 12-tape series until we got done with it. And that's about the time when I went down and trained with Sergio and grappled with him. So when he had his night class, he had me wrestle with everybody in his class, and those guys were all blue belt, purple belt level guys, and I was able to control and beat all of them. And then he goes, "This guy learned his jiu-jitsu off videotapes, and he's crushing you guys. So you guys need to step it up a little bit." But that's when Sergio said, "I'm going to teach you everything about jiu-jitsu that the Americans are not being taught. But when I teach you this stuff, you can't admit to anybody where you learned it, or I'll be in big trouble with the families, the Gracies and all that sort of stuff."
Oh, okay.
So he was teaching me jiu-jitsu strictly for literally street fighting. So
Gotcha.
Yeah, it was pretty cool experience.
And where's he at now?
He is back in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. He wants to come back to America and open up a series of facilities, and asked me if I wanted to jump in on it with him. And I haven't coached for a while, but I would consider it because he is such a good guy. He's a smart businessman, and Brazilians in general are kind of their own schedule kind of people. They're very slow paced. They're always late, that sort of stuff. But he's not that kind of guy. I mean, he came to America, got a master's degree, went back, has been the head editor at his father's newspaper in Rio de Janeiro. So he's a bright guy, and he's a hard worker. So,
because how did you make the transition from being the fighter to being the coach? Because quite frankly, you were a great fighter, but you were probably one of the top, if not the top, coaches in this sport of all time.
Well, I mean, for the most part, I was fighting while I was coaching. So I was, writing up practices and all that sort of stuff, and doing the drills with all the guys, doing all the runs with the guys, the lifts, all that sort of stuff. So I was kind of like Paul Newman in Slapshot, to be honest with you.
Right.
I was practicing with him and just trying to be the guy that kept everything on track and would keep the guys from killing each other. When you got a bunch of alphas like that in the same room, you're going to have problems. I mean, fights would break out all the time. And
real fights.
One thing I learned from the Iowa wrestling room when I used to go up there during the summers and wrestle up there with the Hawk Club guys was when a fight would break out, they'd just run over to the light switches and shut everything off. So it was totally pitch black. And then they couldn't see each other to fight anymore, right? And that's how they would slow everything down. And you hear guys in the darkness cussing at each other, and all that. And you can hear the coaches going, shut up, calm down, this and that. Then they turn the lights back on when everybody calmed down, and everybody started wrestling again, right? So that's one of the tricks that I learned from those guys. But every once in a while, I just have to let them go at it too.
Now, would that have been under Gable, or would that have been Barry Davis, or?
That was Gable was there. He was not coaching at the time, but that was and part of the time, yes, Gable was the head coach. It was right before he retired, and then Zaleski
Barry Davis is in Wisconsin.
Yeah, Zaleski and the Brands brothers were there quite a bit.
Those guys, I tell you, the Brands brothers, it's not hype, is it? Those guys are really that hardcore.
They're very, very foul tempered. I mean, that's like a couple Wolverines on each side of you, and so. When Royce Alger fought twice in the UFC, Royce really just didn't want to train. I think he was burned out from wrestling so intensely for so many years. I mean, he'd won a world title in freestyle and had lost his chance to the Olympics. Kevin Jackson had beat him out. And so I went to an Iowa wrestling meet, and I was down on the floor talking to Alger, and both the Brands brothers came up like bookends on both sides of us. And they were staring at me like they were going to attack me. And so Tom looks at me, and he goes, "Miletich." And I go, "Yeah?" And he goes, When's Alger going to get another fight in the UFC? And I go, when he learns how to fight. And then he didn't have anything to say after that. It was like, all right, okay, I get it. So
Now, is it hard to transfer some of the big name guys like the Algers and the Brands and like somebody like a Jordan Burroughs? Would it be not almost impossible? Would it be really tough to train them into being great fighters? Because you don't really see the big name wrestlers.
Well, I mean, the wrestlers that I would look for to if I were recruiting are the guys that can shoot low singles from the outside, guys that are have really fast feet. Can move, can scramble super fast, things like that, where the wrestlers with that grinding style that want to have their hands on you, kind of heavy on the head kind of guys, aren't always the best MMA guys just simply because they're not quick enough with their striking. So they've got to be able to strike, cover the gap, hit takedowns quick from the outside if they have to, things like that. And so that would be the type of athlete I'd look for. So a Burroughs would actually be quite scary. I almost talked Cale Sanderson into fighting.
That would have been really scary.
Before he went to Penn State,
okay,
when he was still coaching, he and
I
went for a flight with the Blue Angels together.
Okay.
And he and I talked quite a bit, and then we would talk by phone. And I said, I'm telling you right now, you will become a millionaire fighting. I said, you will, and if that's something you want to do. And he goes, I don't know. He thought about it. He goes, give me a little time. And then the next thing I know, Penn State had offered him a job, and he was making an awful lot of money coaching, so he took that instead. So.
Yeah, because you're talking about a guy that he was like a Gable. I mean, Jordan Burroughs. Those guys are world renowned in wrestling.
Whole different level. I mean, it's like a Ben Askren who, will take. What was the kid's name offhand? I can't remember. Who won 4 national titles at 4 different weight? Kyle Dake.
Oh yeah.
Askren took Dake and just mauled him in a wrestling match. You know what I mean? Just destroyed him. It made Dake look like a kid.
And it's kind of weird how that goes. I mean, because Aymar, who couldn't win a national championship the last 2 years, win the first 2 years, couldn't win one the last 2 years because both Penn State kids are the ones that knocked him out, but couldn't win one. But now he's on a national level, competing at a very high level.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at USA Wrestling right now, there's some scary dudes. I mean, they're stacked. There's a bunch of hammers. So
maybe we'll see Aymar in the octagon someday.
I wouldn't doubt it. Cejudo just won the world title in the UFC, right? Beat Johnson. So good for Cejudo.
Yeah. So. How did you make the transition? We talked about it a little bit, but from being a fighter to being the world, probably the world's best coach in this sport. I mean, how did you get the caliber of people? Were you blessed because you were that close to Iowa City and that many great wrestlers?
Not necessarily. Guys came from all over, really. But what it was once I had built a core of really top notch fighters. Everybody expected people that came into the room. If somebody was allowed to even come into the room to practice with all those guys, the room was 95 degrees all the time. And if it was somebody who was maybe a big fish in a little pond coming from another gym training for a fight, now every guy you grab is ranked in the top 10 in the world or a world champion. So you get no rests. It's a different guy every 5 minutes. And these guys would,
iron sharpens iron type.
Yeah, and so they get through maybe a Monday and Tuesday, and then after Wednesday, which was live sparring for 15 rounds and then running the hill, for another hour after that, they wouldn't come back. They were done. Or they would literally go to pick up their bag in the middle of practice because they were just getting destroyed. And everybody in the room said, if you walk out of the room with your bag, you're not coming back. So we're just letting you know. And they'd look at their bag and kind of look at the guys and a couple times back and forth. And some would decide to stay, but most would pick up their bag and walk out. And they wouldn't come back. So we were just thinning the herd is what we were doing. If they didn't belong, they knew it. But the guys that stuck it out, no matter what, everybody who came was just getting mauled.
The good ones, the bad ones, it didn't matter.
Yeah, because they weren't used to the pace and the number of guys that were world class all in one room. So that more from fatigue, to be honest with you. They weren't used to that intensity. And the ones that stayed got tough. I guess if you're going to stay that long and go through those torturous beatings and the endurance stuff, you're going to get tougher, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah. Well, and one of my favorite stories of all times in this sport is, obviously you and Mark, because you guys get homegrown here, but it's got to be Matt Hughes. I mean, that guy who went from never wrestling a match in his life to his freshman year in high school saying, I'm going to give this a try, to being a 2-time undefeated state champion by the time he was a junior and a senior. Now, all of a sudden, he's been thrown into the octagon, and he was one of the best ever.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. And Matt, I refereed Matt's, I think, first or second fight, and he fought a Brazilian. Brazilian put him in a triangle, and he slammed the Brazilian like he did to Carlos Newton when he knocked Carlos out from that triangle choke. He knocked the guy out, and I looked at Hughes and went, just this ridiculous power. I mean, this guy is a freak. So I said to him after the fight, I go, if you come to Iowa, come up and train with me, see how you like it, stuff like that. But if you give me the chance to train you, I guarantee I'll make you a world champ. And so he came up, and he and I wrestled. It was just he and I on, I think, a Saturday or Sunday morning. Mm-hmm. And we were it was when I rented a racquetball court, and I put mats on the walls and on the floor. So it was just a battle box. Mm-hmm. And so he and I started from our feet and did takedowns, and then once we hit the ground, we'd go to the submission grappling stuff. And I probably had him in 30 submission holds, at least. And one time I picked him up, I had him in a guillotine, and I picked him up off his feet, ran him backwards into the wall, butt first. He went limp, so I assumed he was unconscious, so I let go of it. He slid down the wall and then exploded with a trained double and took me all the way across that racquetball court and smashed me into the other wall and was on top of me, attacking me like a rabid dog. And I had bronchitis at the time, and I go, after about 30 minutes, I go, hey, listen, I'm breathing through a straw right now. I got a feel for how good you're going to be. And he goes, I didn't drive 3.5 hours to work out for a half hour. So we kept going, and he stuck it out. His first real practice then when he came down, didn't have a mouthpiece. We were doing submission grappling. I said, do you have a mouthpiece? He said, no. I said, you might want to get a mouthpiece. You're going to get your teeth knocked out doing this. And he goes, I'll be fine. 5 minutes later, both his front teeth were gone. So I had to run him to the dentist.
Oh, man. Good story. This guy, he went on to wrestle for Eastern after high school, right? Because he wrestled.
Yeah, he was an All-American at Eastern a couple times, I think, I think he was 4-time All-American actually.
Was that a D1 school or D2?
Oh yeah, D1, because he used to wrestle. He used to have 1-point matches with Joe Williams at Iowa.
Oh, really?
They used to have battles at like the Midlands and stuff like that.
Joe Williams that's probably one of the top 2 or 3 names in the history of Illinois wrestling.
Yeah. So Hughes and he would just have knockdown, drag-out matches.
Wow. Yeah, no, I never.
That tells you how high level, how strong Hughes is.
Yeah, Joe went on to wrestle for Iowa. He was a 4-time All-American, I believe, at Iowa too.
I think, what was he, 2 or 3-time national champ?
Yeah. At least 2.
Yeah,
if not 3.
That was a scary guy. I used to watch him. He was a scary dude.
Well, his brother TJ, and I think they were like 5 Williams brothers, and between them all, they had like over 20 state championships, and who knows what, because TJ went on and had a pretty good collegiate career himself after that.
Yeah, he was tough.
Yeah, that's those are back in the days when there weren't all that many 4-time state champions in Illinois. And
right.
They came up. It was him and another guy that got into MMA stuff, but I don't think he was ever all that great, was Joey Gilbert. The
Gilbert boys, the Gilbert boys both were fighters, and then there was 2 other brothers from up there. But when Joe Gilbert, I'd known Joe for a while from just his wrestling accolades and stuff like that, and he was just starting in MMA. And he was fighting a kid named Wisniewski. The Wisniewski brothers were from the Chicagoland area or Indiana near Chicago. And the Wisniewski brothers looked like computer programmers. The skinniest, most pale, just timid-looking kids you've ever seen in your life. And so I'm standing in the ring, and I'm refereeing this fight, and it's Joey Gilbert against a Wisniewski kid. And Wisniewski's 16 at the time, mind you. And I walk over to Gilbert, and I go, man, don't kill this kid. I go, look at him. And he goes, yeah, I got you. Don't worry about it. Wisniewski beat him half to death.
Oh, I bet.
Destroyed Joey Gilbert without being a wrestler, looking like a computer programmer. And I tell you, the Wisniewski boys were tough.
They were. They really were. Tough. I'm trying to think of where they're from. It wouldn't be Providence, New Lenox, because he was from Tinley Park Andrew, and that would have been really close. But
I think they might have been from like northwest Indiana or something like that, or Evansville even maybe, because I remember them being in the hook and shoots and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, because it was them and the BBs were a big name.
Okay.
Up in that area. Yeah. They went to Montini. But anyway, let's get back to UFC. But I could talk for days about wrestling. But
right.
You get into this, and you, like I said, at one time you had 3 world champions in the stable at the same time, right? You had Jens Pulver, you had
Jens Pulver, Tim Sylvia, Matt Hughes, and they actually, it was myself, Hughes, Rob Lawler, and Jason Black at that time and Jason Black wrestled at Buena Vista or Simpson, I can't remember, but all 4 of us were ranked in the top 10 in the world just at 170.
Oh wow!
And so the UFC, that's why the UFC kicked me out of that weight division. They go, you've trained yourself out of a job. You're done. Like, you got to go up to 185. I didn't want to. I knew I wasn't big enough. Those guys are cutting down from
but you did
225. Yeah, but I was a little older, a little more broken up. You know what I mean? And when it comes to fighting really true world-class guys, you know, weight's going to definitely make a difference, especially guys that are cutting down from 2 1/4 type size. You know what I mean? Those are big men. Now,
you got that many people in the same weight class, in the same stable, wrestling together, and you're talking about fights. Is that what they were fighting about? Because, they wanted to be the top dog.
No, you know what? Everybody and it was kind of neat how it all worked out, you know. I'll give you a good conversation from the locker room after practice. And I had not had a good night. Hughes had really gotten the best of me, and Hughes was definitely ranked in the top 4 at the time, and I was the reigning world champion at the time. And Hughes looked at me. He goes, "You better keep looking over your shoulder, old man." He goes, "I'm gaining on you fast." And what he didn't realize is Rob Lawler was sitting right behind him on another bench. I go, "Well, while you're chasing me, you might want to look over your shoulder." And he turned around and he saw Lawler there, and he goes, "Yeah, I get what you're saying." So it was more of I think it was, Matt was respectful in the terms of let me finish out my deal. I lost it to Carlos Newton. He took it back from Carlos Newton, held it for a long time. BJ beat him, then he took it back from BJ, held it for a while longer until he lost to GSP. And I knew that Robbie was going to eventually win that title. It was just a matter of when. You know what I mean? So
now I realize this is something that it doesn't matter whether you're talking about Babe Ruth contrary to Mickey Mantle, compare him to whoever. You can't compare, but you give Matt Hughes. Well, first of all, you probably would have been head and shoulders above the rest of them time-wise. But if you're all about the same age, you and Matt probably were to me, and maybe you can confirm or deny. You guys are better than Penn in your days.
You know what? I tell you what, BJ was the best fighter instinctually that I've ever seen. He did things naturally that you just can't teach. I mean, he was really, really a slick kid, and so. And BJ, even though I think I went 2-2 against him in coaching between Lawler and Hughes, BJ was actually very close to our team. We respected him a lot, even though there was a big rivalry. And so, I mean, to this day, Hughes, Pulver, Lawler, Penn, all those guys, we're all still real good friends. If I go to a UFC, I'm hanging out and eating with BJ and Matt and those guys and stuff.
How's Matt doing? Because he had a bad car accident not that long ago.
Yeah, he had a coal train going 55 hit his truck. He got really banged up. Obviously, went into a coma, and for a while there, they really didn't think he was going to pull out of the coma. But he came out of the coma, and he still has some motor problems, a little bit of balance problems, and he's all there mentally though. So I mean, he's still a complete smart aleck. He'll crack jokes constantly, and there's a little bit of a speech impediment there still, which he's working through. But when a young kid came up, had a really good looking girlfriend with him, the guy's like 25 or whatever, and he was just laughing, going, Pat, before the accident, I might have a chance.
Now, is he still around here at all, or is he down in Hillsboro?
He's down in Hillsboro. Yeah, he's down on their farm and stuff. So, yeah.
Does he come up here a lot, or?
He doesn't make it up here. He does a lot of stuff. He'll go to UFCs, especially when Lawler's fighting. He'll go to those, and I've seen him at a few others. But he was at the one in Chicago when I cornered Mike Jackson, who's a good friend of mine. I've worked with Mike a little bit, but Mike asked me to corner him for that fight against CM Punk. And so I cornered him for that up there, and Hughes was up there, and BJ and those guys, so we hung out quite a bit.
Now, how did you get Robbie Lawler to come? Where's he from? He's not from around here either?
No, he's from Bettendorf.
Is he?
Yeah, he's from Bettendorf. He was playing football and wrestling at Bettendorf, and I knew of him well. I'd watched him, when he was young. I even watched him. Gosh, I remember watching him play soccer when he was like 10. Oh, wow. But I knew he was a really good wrestler, and I liked him, and that he had a lot of fire. And so Wayne Hoganson, who's a chiropractor that I wrestled with in high school, and Paul Castro, who was my wrestling coach, one of my wrestling coaches in high school, who was kind of a mentor to me, both said to me, they said, hey, we've got this young guy named Rob Lawler. He's 16 right now, but we think that he would benefit greatly from coming here in the off season from football and wrestling, and training with you guys during the summers and just being around you guys. And I think they said, we think it'll rub off on him real well. And I said, yeah, bring him up. So that's when Rob started. And I can tell you, by the time Rob was 17 or 18, he was wrecking most of the guys in the room with striking.
Really?
Yeah, he was already, he got it. He understood the boxing stuff. He really got he understood the head movement, the footwork, the angles, all that sort of stuff. And I just watched him at age 17 slapping world champions around, and it was pretty cool to watch.
Well, and that would be pretty cool. I mean, because you got, like you said over and over, that you've got guys that, 3 or 4 ranked in the top 5 in the same stable, in the same gym, working together all the time. I mean, you're pulling up new guys in, and all of a sudden here comes, different guys that you turn them into world champions, How did Tim Sylvia, what's his background? I know he's from Maine, right?
Yeah, he's from Maine, and when he got to me, he was about 340 pounds. Oh, really? And real out of shape.
He's what, 6'7", 6'8"?
6'8", yeah. But he was probably 340. Couldn't jump rope, couldn't walk and chew gum at the same time, cried every practice. I mean, I've told people that before, in interviews. He literally would bawl to me in the office after every practice because everyone in the room would just slap him around, throw him around, but he wouldn't give up. And so in talking with Matt Hughes, Jens Pulver, Jeremy Horn, who was training with me at the time too, we were in the office talking, and they go, "What are you going to do with this guy? I mean, he's awful." And I said, I can't tell him to leave. He won't give up. I'm not gonna ruin his dream. If he won't give up, I'm gonna let him keep coming. You know what I mean? He's at least sticking it out.
Right.
And then the first fight that he had under our gym, he went out and turned into somebody that we hadn't seen before. Like, he just had a switch when he got in the cage,
right.
And he destroys the guy, and then he destroys another guy, and he's just rolling through people all of a sudden. And Jens Pulver was mean to him. I mean, mean to him to the level of you're not even allowed to hang out with us.
He's like half the size.
Yeah, Jens was fought at 155. So Jens was just a foul-tempered little guy. He was ornery. He wrestled at Boise State, really tough guy. And so he would literally yell at Tim, you can't hang out with us. I don't want you around. I don't like you. And that's the way it is. And Tim came up to me one time crying, and he goes, "Why doesn't Jens like me?" I go, "'Cause you're being a baby." I go, "You're big enough to eat hay and crap in the middle of the road, and you got this little guy intimidate you. Next time he yells at you, stand up for yourself, and he'll respect you, right?" And so, next thing we know, Rodriguez held the world title at the time, heavyweight. I think that's his name. Anyway, Tim gets the call to fight him for the heavyweight world title, and Jens totally changes. And Jens is going to be a teammate now. Jens is supporting him. Jens even broke down in tears in the locker room before the fight, gave him a hug, and said, "I love you." He goes, "You've stuck it out. You've gotten to this point. Now let's go do this." So Tim went out and knocked him out, won, and you can see after that fight, Jens is up on top of the cage sitting there, pumping his fist, and Tim goes over and gives him a hug, and I mean, it's like kind of a cool moment. You know what I mean? Jens gave him a lot of tough love, let's put it that way.
He came from Boise State, you say?
He wrestled at Boise State in Idaho. He was originally from Seattle.
Oh, okay.
And was part of a horse family.
That's where. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, his father was a jockey.
Oh, really?
A horse jockey. So Jens and his brother Abel worked in the stables and worked the gates and all that sort of stuff at the racetrack.
Oh, never knew that, because that's where Joe Gilbert wrestled in college.
Oh, at Boise.
Yeah, Boise.
Okay, yeah.
Because I'll never forget, we went to not to get off subject, but we went to a Iowa versus Northwestern versus Boise State triangular at Dixon High School.
Oh, wow.
Mike Mena was wrestling for Iowa back then. I think it was TJ. I don't think it was Joe.
Okay.
But TJ Williams was wrestling for Iowa back then.
Yeah.
We went to watch them wrestle, and next thing you know, here comes Jens Pulver. It's like, whoa. Or not Jens Pulver, I'm sorry. Here comes Joe Gilbert. So,
okay.
It kind of threw us for a loop. We got to kind of see them all. But you get a guy. Did he just show up from Maine, or did he have a fighting background at all? Or
I met him. He was at a UFC, and he was standing there. He walked up and introduced himself to me, and I looked at him and I thought, man, this is a big guy. And he goes, can I come out to Iowa? I go, sure. I go, come out to Iowa. Just come out and train for a week, see how you like it, and we'll go from there. And he ended up staying, stuck it out.
Yeah, because he still lives in the area. Jen still lives in the area.
Yeah, Jens lives in Bettendorf. Tim, I think, lives out in Buffalo.
Okay. So
I see those guys every once in a while.
Yeah. I ran into Tim at Hoo Hot one day.
Okay.
A long time ago, and he didn't, of course, know who I was. And I said, hey, would you want to do a radio show sometime? He goes, sure. And got his number. I lost it, so I can't. I'll have to get it from you.
I think I've got it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Pretty sure that you would have that. But anyway, no, nice guy, very personable and stuff. You look at these guys, and they're not. somebody you wouldn't be scared to, go up to. Matter of fact, the first time I ever met you, I'm working at the airport, and you came up to us and were talking to us.
Yeah.
You guys are very approachable and really nice guys. You wouldn't think, But I have heard that, like you said, Jens has kind of got that fiery attitude, or did.
He's got. I mean, he's worked that out. You know what I mean? And.
But that's what you want as a coach.
Yeah, you can't really teach it. But he was the kind of guy that, he would just come in and just be in a foul mood. And there was one time that Sam Hoger, who was training with us, he came from the Tough Reality show and he graduated from LSU and then came up to train with us. His first time at the gym, he walks in. I had never met him before. Walked up, introduced himself to me, and the whole team was working out in the gym lifting. It was a lifting session. And he walks up to Tim Sylvia, shakes his hand, says, "Hi, I'm Sam Hoger." He goes, "I'm going to knock you out tonight, big boy." And Tim goes, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm going to knock you out tonight." And Tim looks at me and goes, "Pat, you might want to get him away from me right now." So I said, "Sam, come here." And Sam's walking away, and he's looking at Tim like, "Yeah, I'm gonna knock you out." I go, "Shut up! Don't say another word." I go, "We don't talk around here. We do. We're not talkers." Right. And so Tim did knock him out that night. Tim,
I would imagine.
Tim made sure that he understood the pecking order of things in the gym.
Now, another thing I've heard about pecking orders in that gym is one of your best fighters never even stepped foot in the octagon, Steve Rusk.
He was the scariest guy, that I've ever trained. I mean, he was so ungodly strong, such a great wrestler, and he wasn't as good at striking. Mark Hansen actually knocked him out one time with a head kick. It was brutal.
Oh,
yeah. But besides that, there was just not a moment that Steve was getting beat up by anybody in the room. I mean, he used to grab Tim Sylvia and throw him. This is when Tim was the reigning heavyweight champion. He would grab Tim, belly to back him, and then get on top of him and gouge his eyes and fish hook his mouth until he had blood pouring out of his mouth. And Tim screaming like a 5-year-old kid.
World champion.
Yeah, the heavyweight world champion, but you just can't do anything about it. You're not getting up, you're not getting him off you, and it's that kind of strength that there's animal strength and there's human strength. Mm-hmm. Rusk is made of some sort of animal fibers that I've like Clydesdale horse type fibers, right. You know what I mean? And he wasn't a massive guy. He was a big guy, but not massive. And I watched him bend a folding chair in half with just by squeezing it with his hands. Uh-huh. We just took a metal folding chair in the locker room because he was getting ready to fight, and he crushed it. And he fought 4 fights long time ago, early on in his career. Won all of them in about 30 seconds, and he looked at me and he goes, "This isn't really a challenge. This isn't much of it," because he was used to wrestling high-level world-class guys, D1, guys, and all that sort of stuff. And he was also concerned, I think, a little bit with his neck. He had to have his neck fused together when he was wrestling at Illinois, and he was never really 100% the same after that.
Okay. That explains. I mean, that's a good reason.
Yeah, but I watched him doing takedowns with Matt Lindland, who was an Olympic silver medalist in freestyle, and he made Lindland look like a little kid. Lindland came over and sat next to me on the wall after we kicked Lindland off the mat because he got taken down so many times by Rusk, and it was win or stay out, right? And he kept wanting to stay out there and go against Rusk because he kept losing and he was getting frustrated. And finally, everybody yelled at him and go, "Lindland, get off the mat!" Just
Olympic silver medalist.
Yeah.
Oh wow!
And so he comes over and he sits down next to me. And he goes, "Who is that?" And I go, "That's just Steve." You just met Steve.
Yeah, I'll never forget a friend of mine. I was a few years older than Steve. His brother Tom was actually a year ahead of me, and then Steve was a couple years behind me. But a friend of mine that lived in Cambridge looked at me one day and he pointed. We were at a wrestling tournament when I was in high school, and he says he's going to be Olympic champ someday, or he's going to the Olympics someday. And I'm like, yeah, he's good, but he's not that. He's just a wrestler from Orion. But everything I've heard about him since his Augie days and then his Illinois days, that he probably, if he would have had that notion, probably could have went that.
I think it all came down to that neck injury. That's what changed everything for him, because I've had a severe neck injury before on that level where I didn't have the surgery, but my vertebrae fused together on their own. Mm-hmm. So my right side, like my right arm's 1.5 inches smaller than my left. I've lost part of my shoulder on the right side, things like that. So, and I've been paralyzed twice from the neck down for 20, 25 minutes at a time.
Really?
When I was training and stuff. So that's why I stopped sparring, stopped all that stuff. So
that kind of stuff happened a lot in the room, or
No, it's just that I think that I never took time off because I was coaching also. So I would train for my fights, get done with my fight, and then I was back in the room on Monday morning helping everybody get ready. So I had to wrestle with everybody, grapple with them, spar with them, do all the stuff with them. So I just never gave my body a rest. There was just never a time when I was able to do that. And I think that I burnt the candle at both ends a little faster than most. Because
it's kind of like, it's like wrestling. I mean, a lot of that stuff, you hear those stories, but they're few and far between. Kind of like Dan Knight, his collegiate career had a great future ahead of him for Iowa State, and I think he broke his neck too, didn't he?
I'm not sure. I know he had a lot of knee problems also. I mean, you look at Royce Alger from Iowa, and I think he's had like 11 or 14 knee surgeries. Oh, wow. It's just there's nothing left.
Yeah.
Those are guys that are going to have titanium knees here in a couple of years. So I was lucky. I never had to have surgery. I refused to have surgery actually on knees and shoulders and my neck and stuff like that. I just didn't want to get cut on because I knew once they started pulling chunks out of me, I was never going to be the same. So,
right.
Yeah.
You hear these stories, but they're kind of few and far between. I mean, your sparring days and stuff, you got hurt a couple times, but a lot of that stuff, as long as you're going 100%, that kind of stuff doesn't happen.
Right. And, of course, like I say, you're going to tweak a knee, you're going to injure a shoulder, you're going to land wrong. Things are going to happen. Most of the time, it was wrestling-related injuries because of just going so hard. Or, when you're sparring and doing takedowns at the same time, you're going from almost upright stance with just a little bend in your knees where you're slugging it out to a train double and you're landing on your head. What I mean? Stuff that just it just happens. But for the most part, besides we had a couple broken forearms, some stingers, some knee injuries, typical wrestling injuries usually.
Now, have you ever had a guy that was a great wrestler? And I'm just going to throw a name out here because I don't know him or anything about him, but let's say somebody like a Dan Gable, let's say, great wrestler, goes to the Olympic gold medal, but just can't take a punch. And I'm not saying Dan can't. I'm just throwing somebody, huge marquee name like that, but can't take a punch. And there it's like, well, okay, my days are over. I'm done.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I don't know what that switch is. I don't know what that internal drive is that makes it so that you don't want to get hit, but you don't care if you get hit at the same time. I mean? Just hard, more, I think a little more fearless than some people. But yeah, there are wrestlers out there, guys who absolutely cower when they see punches, heaters flying into them. They're just nope, done. And I've seen it happen a lot. I really have, and we had one guy that trained with us for a long time who he actually started going to a sports psychologist because he couldn't figure it out. And I said, if you need a sports psychologist to figure out why you don't like to get hit, and that's what I would say too. I'd say, it would be like being a race car driver and not wanting to go fast. It's just so detrimental to what you're trying to do because you're going to take a beating no matter what. So,
right. What's your job now? I mean, you're gone all the time. What's your role now?
I do color commentary for Access TV, which is Mark Cuban's network. We do shows. Well, we've got 45 scheduled shows this year, so 45 Fridays out of the year I am in some arena in some city around the country doing a live broadcast, and then also I've got a law enforcement military training company that I've done that for about 20 years, and that Mark Hansen got me into that, and it was an interesting learning curve back then because the sport was so controversial. But law enforcement knew they needed something.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, a lot of the PPCT tactics, which I know are big in Illinois and a lot of other places, the officers knew that was the court defensible stuff, but they knew that wasn't something they could depend on, because, I mean, if you get a guy like you who's big and strong and I do a pressure point on you, I'm just going to make you mad. You know what I mean? Especially a guy on drugs or drunk or whatever they are. They're not going to feel it. And they're going to get angry and hurt you. So Hansen started bringing me around doing that, and then I started training military. And I've I won't say who I've trained as far as special forces and stuff like that, but I've been lucky to train a lot of very high level people from federal agencies, local departments, all the way up to a lot of special forces teams and stuff like that. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's got to be pretty rewarding. I mean, it's
a lot. To me, it was a lot more rewarding than coaching because I would get probably the highest level guy that I've ever worked with rolled up a flag. He would always roll up American flags and put them in his backpack and take them with him on missions when they would go after bad guys, in Afghanistan, Iraq, whatever. And so after this particular mission, it was a pretty rough, hairy situation, and they were outnumbered, outgunned quite a bit. I mean, it was I think 50-4 or something, 60-4. They were pinned down, and they had to battle and fight their way out of a valley in the Hindu Kush Mountains. It was really a cool story. And he waited. He couldn't tell me online. He's still in. So he couldn't tell me online. He couldn't tell me over the phone. He couldn't text it to me. He goes, I want this to be face to face anyway. So I was just on the East Coast in Virginia and met with him and trained his guys again. And he sat me down and gave me the down low of it, and then told me all about it so that I understood what that flag meant to him. So
yeah, that's unbelievable.
So yeah, it's a lot more rewarding for me because I'll get a phone call, a text message, an email, whatever, and said, hey man, your training paid off. I was stuck in the kitchen in the corner, it was a domestic or whatever, and the guy was going nuts on me, and this is how it all went down, and so your training helped me a lot. Yeah. So it's kind of cool.
Unbelievable. And Hanson, is he's still a police officer, or is he retired?
No, is he a lieutenant or a captain now? I'm not even sure. He's over at Davenport Police Department, and he still does a lot of the, inevitably you end up at a desk job a lot of times when you're the high up guy like he is. But he loves to go down and do the trainings and stuff like that, the defensive tactics and stuff like that. So he's still heavily involved in that.
Is Sylvia was with Milan PD for a while, wasn't he?
I think he was. What was he? An auxiliary police officer with them? I think something like that. And then, so Tim, God bless him. He's going into bars to check IDs, as an auxiliary police officer, riding along with somebody, I think, or whatever. And everybody in the bar knew who Tim was, so they were just walking up and wanting to get pictures with him. So it was kind of counterproductive to what they were trying to do. You know what I mean? It was a little odd, I think. So. I think they went, Tim, I think this might not work out well. This is like Steven Seagal doing drug busts or something.
Right. Yeah, he was an auxiliary police officer somewhere, wasn't he?
For Maricopa County for Sheriff Joe.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so I trained Sheriff Joe's guys down there. A lot of great guys that were in that, and I trained also their prison guards.
Okay.
And so anyway, they took me to meet Sheriff Joe in his office in downtown Phoenix. Now, just to get into that office, you have to go through 3 different waiting rooms and go up 3 different elevators to different levels, and all of those waiting rooms have bulletproof walls. I mean, there's like a $2 million contract out on him at the time by the cartels. So I get into his office, and the detective that was a friend of mine from Maricopa County goes in and goes, Sheriff Joe, I want you to meet Pat Miletich. And he goes, who is he? Just looked kind of disgusted. He goes, who is this guy? And he starts explaining who I am, and he goes, Sheriff Joe goes, shut up, dummy, I know who he is. He goes, hey, Pat, I wanted to ask you a question. He goes, do you want to take care of this settlement we have to deal with because of, somebody suing us for, because, they have to deal, obviously, in any big city or anywhere, you're going to deal, as a police officer, you're going to deal with people who try to get in fights with you, right, or try to get you to hurt them so that they can sue you. And, there's a lot of that stuff that they have to deal with anymore, and it's ridiculous. But, he's an interesting guy. Sheriff Joe is and there's a lot of people. He's very polarizing, obviously. Oh yeah. But I think ultimately he was thinking of the citizens of Phoenix and Maricopa County, and they were number one, and that's the way it was. And if you didn't belong there, you didn't belong there. And yes, you're going to wear pink when you're in this. And I actually got confronted by a guy. I was in a restaurant in Phoenix, and the guy comes up and he says, "Hey, aren't you Pat Miletich?" I said, "Yeah." And so he said, what are you doing in Phoenix? I said, well, I'm training Maricopa County sheriffs. And he goes, man, that Sheriff Joe, he goes, I hate that, it's a bunch of choice words for him. He goes, I got an OWI, and I was in there for like a week wearing pink boxer shorts and a pink T-shirt and this and that. And I go, well, and he goes, oh, and one other thing, he goes, they make us all walk out of Tent City into a big room and stand there, and while Sheriff Joe is on the TV monitor reading them a bedtime story out of a children's book, right? And so, I looked at him and I go, well, let me ask you one question. Since you got arrested, have you been arrested again? Have you been back? And he goes, no. I go, then it worked, didn't it? And he goes, yeah, I guess you're right. And he walked away. So,
well, I worked many years when I started my career kind of in Kelowna. I worked full time there. And you arrest people, and they'd be like, "Can you just take me across the bridge? I'd rather be in Rock Island County than Henry County." Because we had a reputation. You know, you don't get caught in Henry County. You get caught in Rock Island County. You get caught somewhere else, but you don't get caught in Henry County. And it's the same thing in Maricopa County. I mean, you did not, when Sheriff Joe was in charge, you didn't want to go to Maricopa County Jail. I mean, you had to sleep in tents. You didn't get to sleep in the beautiful brand new facility they had. You got to sleep in tents outside. You had to wear pink and all this other stuff. But like you said, the recidivism rate in Maricopa County is so low. Because of that, he's not only looking out for the citizens of Maricopa County, but he was also looking out for the people that end up coming to jail.
He's trying to rehabilitate people.
Exactly.
You know, he wants it to be a painful experience.
Exactly.
You know, you're gonna do some work. You're gonna get paid a penny a day, whatever, penny an hour. But you know, they did. The prison guards asked me to go to do a breach. They were having problems with drugs in the prison there, and you're talking all MS-13 guys and cartel guys. That's legitimately hundreds of guys like that in there. I mean, it was a scary place. But they didn't tell me they were going to throw flashbangs. So I'm on the tail end of the back guy going in. These guys are all geared up. I got nothing on. I got no gear, nothing, and certainly no ear protection. And so I get in and the flashbangs go off, and scared me as bad as it scared the prisoners because they didn't tell me, right? But so they, you know, obviously went in, got all the guys sitting Indian style in rows with their faces against a wall. But there was a couple of the cartel guys eyeballing me, and they told me, don't wear any jewelry, nothing recognizable for your shirt on like where you live, anything like that. Just, you know, don't let them know you have. And I could tell by looking at these guys would gladly gut me. Right. You know, that was the kind of people that we were dealing with.
Yeah, and them MS-13 guys and the cartel guys, those guys, it's scary. And
people can be offended all they want, but MS-13, they are animals.
Yeah,
they are. Absolutely.
And you know, let's get onto that because you've got a podcast also, right?
Yeah, I do a podcast called The Conspiracy Farm with Jeffrey Wilson, who's my co-host, really smart guy from Davenport, Iowa. And you know, I was on his podcast, and I said, you know, because at the end of his podcast, he had the Triangle of Doom questions, and they were conspiracy questions, right? And so I answered the questions. We got done. We talked a little bit more, and I said, hey, I've been thinking about this podcast called The Conspiracy Farm for a couple of years now, and I was wondering if you maybe would want to co-host it with me. And he goes, I'd love to. That's awesome. Great idea. All of that. And so we started out talking about, you know, not necessarily conspiracies, but we talk about geopolitical and domestic policy stuff and the stuff that the media is not telling us, you know, and luckily a lot. And luckily I've got a lot of really good intel people. And, you know, people are of the mindset, you know, it's troubling to me that there are a lot of people out there, almost half this country, who would literally fight tooth and nail for the actual media that's lying to us. That's cognitive dissonance on a level I can't comprehend. So, and I just tell people, listen, I'm gonna tell you what I know to be going on. I'm going to give you some facts. You can doubt those facts. You can go and research them yourselves and make up your own mind. But if you're just going to, ignore what I'm telling you and say that I'm wearing a tinfoil hat, then I can't help you.
Right.
I can't help you. But, you know, so many things we've proven to be true, documented. We called out a lot of things that were coming. We knew that there was going to be a lot of arrests for pedophiles, human trafficking. The minute Trump was in, we knew that a lot of people were in trouble and that things were going to change. And we also knew that a lot of big name people were going to start committing suicide, and a lot of people started committing suicide. And those bodies dropping are not done. I mean, it's going to continue a lot. It has not even remotely reached the level that I think it's going to get to in this country.
The thing is there's so many things that you can see happen, like you're talking about, that you can see happening where you know there's an underlying effect that nobody really can understand unless you delve into it.
Right.
But nobody wants to. They want to just believe what they get face value on 4, 6, 8, and 18 and CNN and
yeah. And I tell them just, you know, and even Fox News is I don't listen to Fox News. I mean, I will listen to CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, NBC, the Today Show, just to go, what are they feeding these people? You know, what line of stuff are they selling now? You know, and so, you know, something people can look into it. I'll just give them one example of, you know, weapon shipments coming out of Bulgaria into Turkey, into Syria, into other areas, you know, where these weapons have been found. I mean, we had Dilyana Gatansheva on our show. She was a Bulgarian reporter who, through some other reporters, she was in Syria, and she filmed the huge caches of these Bulgarian weapons from the Arsenal Weapons Manufacturing Company. Now, these shipments all had diplomatic immunity, so they couldn't even be searched. So the Silkway Airlines was flying them, and then there was a Marianne Danica ship that was hauling. So we already know the routes and the stuff that they're using, the companies that are shipping all these weapons that are ending up in ISIS hands, Al-Nusra hands, Boko Haram, all these. So people just literally couldn't believe that there was a CIA program that was building a 50,000-man army of terrorists to take out Assad. It's a lunacy, but people can say that wasn't true. But I can tell you through my intelligence people, I asked them right away. I said, did Trump stop the CIA program? And they also, of course, were using Saudi money and other stuff to fund and arm ISIS. But did Trump stop that program? And he said, absolutely, 100%. And then I would tell people also, look, if you doubt what I'm saying, that's okay. But why wouldn't the media report on who was doing the banking for ISIS and their oil transactions when they took over all those oil fields and those pipelines? Who was buying it? Who was buying the oil? Where was the money going? Which banks? Where was it being laundered? We know. People can look it up for themselves and actually investigate it. But so the media is not giving us the reality of really what's going on. So it's frustrating with some people.
It's kind of who they're funded by. But anyway, how do you find your how do you find your podcast?
You can go to the Conspiracy Farm on Stitcher, iTunes, YouTube, and also you can find us on Facebook, and then at Conspiracy Farm 1 on Twitter. We do take donations, so people can go on there. But I mean, Alex Jones InfoWars just got pulled off of every social media. They got removed off iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. It's the shutting down of free speech, and I don't necessarily even subscribe to very much of what Alex Jones says because he over sensationalizes and does his own level of propaganda on the other in the other direction. So, but anybody who hates Alex Jones and hates what he says should also keep in mind that it is free speech that's very important no matter what.
Absolutely.
And so what happens if it goes the other way and people start going after liberals just because they're upset? What if they get removed off Twitter and Facebook and they no longer have a voice? It's a very scary situation.
Absolutely.
And so people need to take a break and say, you know what, even if I disagree with someone, it's okay, and you have the right to express yourself. Otherwise, this country's dead.
So you're a 6, 7-year-old kid getting his bike stolen all the time. Your bones are sticking out of everywhere. Did you ever imagine 30, 40 years later you would be probably one of the biggest household names definitely one of the biggest household names in your sport? But I mean, you're known worldwide. I mean,
you know what? I just I got made fun of a lot for being a dreamer. All my buddies, in middle school and high school and stuff said, you're just a dreamer. And they used to say, I'd tell people what I was going to do. I'm going to be a world champion at something. I just don't know yet. Maybe it's going to be boxing. I don't know. I wanted to play linebacker for Iowa, but I stopped growing. All my brothers were 6'4", 6'5", and I stopped growing at 5'10". And so I said, well, I'm not going to be a linebacker for Iowa at 5'10". But so I think it was just, I just had a vivid imagination, and I think that I fooled myself into believing that I could win a world title. Honestly, I just told myself over and over and over, and I visualized it so much that it just was ingrained in me to work really hard every day and realize that goal. And I think that's something that I tell kids all the time, is that if you truly can convince yourself, it doesn't matter where you're at today. You could be out of shape, weak, anything. But if you can visualize yourself as something else enough and convince yourself and then follow that up with work ethic, you can get there. You can definitely get there. Yeah.
So you've been a world champion yourself. You've trained numerous world champions. You've trained special forces. You've trained police officers all over the country. I mean, some of the biggest names in law enforcement, Joe Apiro. You've got your own podcast. What's next? I mean, you've done voiceovers for video games,
right?
I mean, you're an analyst or a color guy, I should say, for UFC. Yeah. What's next?
Right now I'm starting a clothing line called M Combat, it's performance wear basically for combat athletes, for ultra runners, for hunters, for law enforcement, for military, stuff you'd wear underneath your ballistic vest, stuff like that, wicking material, so we're doing that. Then we just started the Odds Gods, which is what we're trying to do right now is get a TV show up and running that is basically, we'll have a host and a co-host, but we'll have in special guests who are experts in any sport of a big event that's coming up, where they discuss nothing without the politics, because nobody wants to hear on the left or the right when they're talking sports. ESPN, I think, has muddied the waters and kind of ruined their chances with the American public by how much they discuss the political side of things in sports. It doesn't belong. So none of that's going to be involved. It's going to be experts talking about the odds, why those odds are the way they are, and inform people who want to bet, because, as you know, the Supreme Court just legalized and made it legal for states to have online sports betting. So we want to have a TV show, and then with our website have all those experts doing their own videos and breakdowns, and then partner up with different state websites and ventures on the sports betting, and just basically work out a percentage deal with the proceeds that they're getting. So that's one of the things that I'm pretty passionate about, just doing that, because it's going to be pretty neat for me. Obviously, I'm fairly educated in the fight game world, but to listen to guys talk about the college football stuff coming up, or basketball or baseball or whatever, and how they break all that stuff down, so I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Here's another idea. Maybe somebody's already approached you. I don't know, but I had Logan Lee on here. I don't know if you know who Logan is.
Wrestler, right?
He's a wrestler for Orion, but he's also a football player, and he's signed with Iowa.
Okay.
Signed with Iowa as a sophomore, and Kirk Ferentz, Lovie Smith, Jim Harbaugh, all these guys, when they were recruiting him, said, stay into wrestling. It makes you more physical. You should start something to where you go and train the NFL to be more physical.
It's funny you say that. It's funny you say that. My agent just last month contacted me, and his agency, which is out in San Diego, really cool agency that they're on the second and third floor of this building. Underneath is a restaurant bar. But they're on the second floor, and they have this huge concrete patio that goes out with railings, and their offices have a whole wall of garage doors that they open up for the baseball games, because they overlook Padre Stadium just over the fence. So it's really cool out there. But anyway, he called me up and he said, hey, he goes, I got an idea. And he handles some really big NFL names, PGA names, and Major League Baseball guys. So he said, got an idea for college linemen and NFL linemen. Would you want to do strength and conditioning camps the way a wrestler and a fighter would train, with your level of conditioning? You don't want to kill these guys because they're 300 some pounds, right, a lot of them, but and then teach them the upright wrestling stuff, the how to pummel, how to get inside, how to do arm drags, how to do all that type of stuff, snap downs, whatever. And I go, absolutely. I go, what are we looking at? He goes, well, they'll pay like $1,000 a week for this stuff, right? And we're talking 100 guys per camp, like $100,000. I go, what's your percentage?
Wow.
So I said, I'll do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
I'll do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, and teach them lateral drops, all kinds of different stuff that they don't get caught.
I saw Andre Tippett get down blocked. He got basically clipped by a receiver. And this is when I was a sophomore in high school, I think. Yeah. Freshman or sophomore.
For the Patriots.
And I was watching when he was playing at Iowa.
Oh, okay.
So I'm watching that's all I watched was Andre Tippett and Larry Station. Those guys were monsters.
Oh, yeah.
So Andre Tippett gets cracked with a block, goes down, lands on his side, and then pushes off with his arms, shoots his legs 45-degree angle up into the running back just coming off the end there, and side kicks him, because Andre Tippett was a black belt in Taekwondo.
Right.
Side kicks the running back in the hip and launches him off his feet and levels, and I go, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was amazing.
I can remember when the Bears played the Patriots in the Super Bowl, that's all they could talk about with Andre was, well, first of all, he was all pro. He was a great linebacker, but he was probably, they had an interview with him before the Super Bowl that he was probably a better martial artist than he was even football player.
Big, scary dude, man. Really big, powerful guy.
I forgot he played for Iowa. Yeah, because there was quite a few people back in the day on those, you were Larry Station and even Reggie Roby. I realized he was a punter, but there was quite a few NFL players, stars, big name
Chuck
stars.
Long played on that team, right?
Yeah.
Gosh, who else played on that team? Who was the running backs back then? You remember?
man, Ronnie Harmon comes to mind, but I don't think was he on that team.
Yeah, I think he might have been.
Was he? Mm-hmm. Yeah, my wife would kill me. We're house divided. I'm a Illini fan. She's an Iowa fan. So, she'd be like, I can't believe you're coming up with these Iowa names. But no, it was a great team. It was a fun team to watch. It really was. I mean, very fun team to watch. But,
right.
We're almost out of time, man. The success that you've had, and it sounds like you got people just calling out of the woodwork saying, "Hey, can you come and train us?" And that's got to be a humbling feeling, but also kind of a proud feeling.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice. It really is. And I think I'm the happiest when I'm teaching, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. I know that when I'm teaching, time kind of stands still for me. Mm-hmm. And it's a great experience. And the thing I miss most, though, to be honest with you, is teaching kids. Like if out of all the things that I've done, training cops, military, and children would be like the three things I do, and if there was only one, it would be the kids. Because kids, that's the thing is people would always come up to me and say, "Hey, Jimmy's leaving for college next week, and we just want to thank you for what you did for him. You took him from this timid little kid into somebody that had some confidence, or a kid that was a bully and hyperactive down to a kid that was on the straight and narrow and goal oriented and had confidence in themselves." And it's cool. People should get their kids in definitely in sports, but wrestling is such a great thing for boys. I mean, think about it. There's just nothing that's going to give you better work ethic. And think the kids aren't going to come home and destroy all your furniture then too. Right. They're going to be tired, right? The boys are going to be doing what
you'd hope so.
Right. So the martial arts and the wrestling and stuff like that. I highly recommend that for boys and even for girls. I mean, girls are going to need martial arts. They're going to need to defend themselves, especially with the stuff you see going on in this country right now. Iowa had, what was it, in an 8-day period, 42 kids disappeared.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And now they're finding these girls' bodies and stuff in Iowa and ditches. And man, the human traffickers and the pedophiles and all that sort of stuff, it's not getting any better.
No, it's not getting any
kids
better.
need to know how to fight.
And they need to know how to fight. They need to know what to look out for, and everything
else. And situational awareness, all that stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy about the stories that we've been hearing lately. But one story, kind of backtrack real quick, was Hughes really knocked out the time that I forget how the move went, but basically he beat a guy after he knocked himself out.
Well, that was when Carlos Newton, when I had lost the title to Carlos, and then Matt was fighting Carlos for the title. That's who they said, I could have the pick. It was either Matt or a guy from another gym could have first dibs at Carlos. So if it was a guy from another gym, I would have got a rematch automatically. Okay. But if it was Matt and Matt beat Carlos, I'm obviously not going to fight my own fighter. Right. So I said, well, I promised Matt he'd get a world title eventually, so let's put Matt in there. So Matt got off the tractor down in Hillsboro, came up, trained for that fight, got ready for it, and was throwing Carlos around. Carlos put him in a triangle. Matt picked him up, and so you're going to envision, he's got that triangle choke on him with his legs, and he's got him up above him, and walks him over to the cage and puts Carlos against the cage way up above the bar there. Carlos is up above it, and Matt starts to go unconscious from the triangle choke. And Matt knows this is the last-ditch effort. He takes 2 steps back off the cage, jumps off his feet, and slams Carlos on his head and knocks him out. Well, I'm already jumping up on the deck right outside the cage. I see Matt. He's on his knees, but he sits up and he kind of looks around with this glazed, doesn't know where he's at look. And I know he's unconscious. Now, Carlos out cold, but Matt's out too, but he doesn't look like he's unconscious. Right. You've seen enough people that are hurt, people that are knocked out, but their eyes are wide open type thing.
Right.
So I dive up over the cage, and I catch my waistline on the cage so that the top half of my body leans down and goes down inside the cage, while John McCarthy is focused on Carlos. He doesn't know Matt's unconscious. I rub my knuckles on Matt's skull, on his hair, and I go, get up, get up, get up, get up. And he looks up at me, and I go, get up. And so he gets up, and he walks over to us at the edge of the cage, and he goes, what happened? And Jeremy Horn looks at him and goes, you just won the title. And that's when he jumped up and started celebrating. He didn't know. He had no clue.
Yeah, I remember watching that fight. I've seen that fight I don't know how many times. That was pretty cool.
That was one of the greatest fights I've ever seen. He and the Trigg fight, the first Trigg fight. That was a good one.
Another one of my all-time, and we didn't get a chance to talk about this, and I should have, but one of the best fights I saw was Michael Bisping against, for the Ultimate Fighter Championship.
Bisping against who?
Oh, what was his name?
Dan Henderson. When Henderson knocked him out, you mean?
They both got the contracts because it was a bloodbath. in the finals. And
I'm trying to remember, or was that Forrest Griffin and
Forrest Griffin?
Okay, Forrest Griffin and. Dang it! Now you got me stumped. And Bonner, Stephen Bonner.
Yeah, Stephen Bonner. That was one of the greatest fights. They
both had the defense of the Washington Generals against the Harlem Globetrotters, but it was all offense. They had a blast.
Oh yeah,
yeah, it was a great fight.
Because you were one of the coaches on that once,
nope,
right?
Nope. I was supposed to be a coach, and I was doing a movie down in Mexico, a Paul Walker film. Dana White called me while I was on the set, said, "Do you want to be the coach against Carlos Newton?" And at the time, Dana and I had little differences. Let's put it that way. And I said, I'm surprised you're even calling me, to be honest with you. He goes, let's just put this all aside, have you be the coach. And so the entire cast, I mean, the Carradine brothers were there, Paul Walker, Lawrence Fishburne, a bunch of different names. The producers, the director was a friend of mine, John Hirschfeld, and then some of my fighters, Roy Markham, Rob Lawler, Tim Sylvia, myself, Chuck Liddell, and a couple other fighters. We all went to a golf club to watch the pay-per-view. They opened it up for us specifically to watch the pay-per-view. And during the fight, Dana White came into the cage to announce the coaches for the next season of The Ultimate Fighter. He brings in Tito Ortiz and Ken Shamrock. And I go, I just got blindsided, right? I just got completely blindsided. So when I got back home from the movie that we were on set for like 5-6 weeks down there in Mexico, I got back and I called his assistant and I said, "Hey Donna, if your boss has any guts, tell him to give me a call." And then he called me and he started yelling right away when I answered the phone. I go, "Whoa!" I go, "What's wrong with you? Could you at least give me a call and let me know that you changed your mind?" Yeah. Stuff like that. So Dana White and I have had our ups and downs.
Now that you say that, I have heard that you guys have had, because you started your own. It was kind of
Well, I started coaching for the IFL, the International Fight League, and all that. And Dana decided he was going to bury everybody in that league and make threats, and it got very ugly for quite a while. But I think then when I got the job at ESPN, at Showtime Sports, and at Access TV, so I was on every major channel that was covering the sport. I think Dana realized that he wasn't going to. I was dug in like an Alabama wood tick, and so he just decided to put me in the Hall of Fame just to shut me up or whatever. So.
Oh, and one last question, because we're taping the show, and we got to let the DJs in, and I apologize, but
no problem.
Are you in the Quad City Sports Hall of Fame? If not, we're going to make a big push right now to make sure.
Yeah, I actually am. I am.
I thought you were, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, so. Yeah. And my wrestling coach from high school, Frank Freeman, just got put in this year.
Oh, okay, great.
Very happy for him. Yeah,
because there's a lot of big name people that have been in the sports, in the Hall of Fame for the Quad City Hall of Fame that people don't realize. I mean, the winningest coach in NBA history. It's basketball, so I can't think of his name, but was from Rock Island.
Oh, okay.
I can't think of his name.
I know. Did he coach the Bucks or something like that?
Yeah, I think he's coached even Dallas too.
Okay, I know who you're talking about. I
basketball.
think.
I lose my mind when it comes.
I'm with you.
But and then you got Brett Bielema just got Big Ten Coach of the Year for Wisconsin a couple times.
Yeah.
Went to Arkansas. So
right.
Congratulations on that, because that's a great
it's neat.
Great honor.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
But anyway, I thank you for coming in. It was a long drive out here from Bettendorf, so I appreciate that.
Wasn't that bad?
So we're a little old Erie, Illinois.
I love it. I love it.
But anyway, Pat Miletich, probably the biggest name in sports history, to me anyway, sports history for the Quad Cities, and that's what the show is about. I try to showcase the greatest athletes, and we have all kinds of different stories that you wouldn't believe. Do you know that the downhill ski champion from 2017 is actually a girl from, and this isn't high school, this is open downhill ski champion, men or women, is now she's a freshman at Colorado Christian University. But she went to North Scott High School, Peyton Schneekloth.
Wow.
Downhill ski champion of the United States.
That's cool.
And did you know that we have Illinois has a rodeo association to where we have right here in town, we have a 2-time state champion steer wrestler.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in high school. So that's what I try to do, is showcase
that's cool.
those things that maybe some people don't know about.
I love it.
I appreciate you coming on and visiting our tiny little town.
I love it. Thank you.
All right, we'll be back this